Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by Farm Credit. I want to start you off by looking here at global sea surface temperatures. There's been a lot of discussion lately just about how warm the month of July was, and a lot of that heat has been driven by these highly anomalous ocean temperatures right now. Now, several things have gone together to make this happen, and yes, there's a coupling between the way the atmosphere behaves and the way the ocean behaves, and a lot of that has to do with the strength of the near-surface winds, and that's why we have, for example, an El Nino going right now. That's also why we saw with that high-pressure cell that sat over this part of the North Atlantic why the ocean temperatures got so hot here, and a relatively stagnant pattern here across the Pacific has also allowed the ocean temperatures to get quite hot. But when you just put this all into context, I'm going to come back to this graphic in a minute, but I want to show you kind of a time series of things. What you've got here is using NOAA data. We're only looking at the month of July, but we're going all the way back to the beginning of their data set, which is 1855. The zero line that running across the middle of this represents the 1901 to the year 2000 average. So all those years stacked up together, divided by the total number of years gives you an average, right? So we're just looking at the difference from average, and it just shows you how highly anomalous 2023's July ocean temperature pattern was right now. Now, compounding with all of this, okay, is the fact that we do have an El Nino that continues to develop. We have this region of cooler water that's right in through here. It's called our negative Pacific meridional mode. This has been shrinking. The cooler water that you see here was from a pair of typhoons that delivered a tremendous amount of rain into parts of China, but they churn up a lot of cooler water this time of year. But the majority of the North Atlantic is very, very warm, and we have to just keep this in the back of our minds as we're thinking about what's happening with our tropical season. Now, we've had this concern all along that how warm the ocean temperatures are, that we could get some rapid development right along the U.S. coast. And given the displaced position of the Bermuda High, we think that there's more of a risk along the East Coast this year than there is maybe coming out of the Gulf initially. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get a system in the Gulf, not even close. That's not my point. It's just kind of assessing the position of the Bermuda High and what it could do to the early hurricane season. And just remember, it is very early in this hurricane season. But I want to show you one other thing before we come back to the Atlantic. And even with all of this cooler than normal water in this area, we've got a tropical system there called Dora, Category 4 strength hurricane, that's just kind of like a buzzsaw going toward the southern side of Hawaii. Now, just to show you where it is, it's way south of Hawaii, but it is quite rare to see a hurricane maintain the M meaning major hurricane swing, so Category 3 or stronger, for so long into the West Pacific. Usually the conditions here are not conducive to this due to wind shear and colder ocean temperatures. But it could be that this would pass as a hurricane crossing the international date line, which is also a pretty rare thing. Now, come back to the Atlantic, and things are quiet right now. You can see that through 8 p.m. on Sunday evening, remember I record these on Sunday night, that the next 7 days at this point are not forecast to have any activity. That doesn't mean the Atlantic is not ready for this. It just means that right now we don't have any major triggers coming off of Africa. So if you notice here the latest 10-day outlook from the European model on just the chance, the probability of getting a tropical system to develop, you can see that we're hovering somewhere in here in the 40 to 50% chance range. But if you get an idea on where tropical low pressure could develop, it's here, which also tells you the position of where our Bermuda High is located. So that's just got to stick in the back of our minds as we go forward into this hurricane season. And again, here it is, August 7th. It's the beginning. It's just now when we start to see a lot of activity increase. So we have, honestly, better than 90% of the hurricane season ahead of us. Where do we currently sit on accumulated cyclone energy? Where we have had Arlene, Brett, Cindy, and Don. And because of how long they have lasted, each of them, especially when you think about Don, we've accumulated a bit more than average what we call cyclone energy. And I bring this up because I want to stress when you look at this that we're here, and this is what the rest of August into September and October typically does. So when I tell you that we have a lot of our hurricane season ahead of us, we're at approximately 16 as our value on the ACE index. Will be at 120 if the year is on average when it finishes. So just for some perspective on where we currently sit. I also want to offer up some more statistics. I like to look at these because it helps me frame where the forecast is going. So despite global temperatures being so warm, we have had cooler than normal temperatures throughout the midsection of the country, and that's even despite a heat wave at the end of July. We've even had cooler than normal weather over toward the Appalachian Mountains. We've been warmer along our coast, and the farther south you go, the temperature's been hot. It's been extremely hot in Texas, also in Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Panhandle. And then as you get into the desert southwest up the west coast, it's also been extremely hot. So it just shows you that the distribution of this heat across not only North America, but the planet is such that we have some places that are exceptionally hot and other places, honestly, honestly, that have the opposite. They have a cooling effect on the overall temperature pattern. Now, what I'm interested in is as we get into this late summer, what does our precipitation look like? So again, the time period here is July through the first 6 days of August. And during that time period, there's been parts of North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina that have been drier. Now, certainly, as I was recording this, I was watching a big line of storms roll through this area, delivering some rain. And as of late, we've seen some heavier rainfall. Just take a look here. See if I can get an update on this. This is the latest data through 9 p.m. on Sunday night as to the weekend rainfall. Now, I realize there's going to be places in here that did get missed, but we saw last week up to a foot of rain come out of here. Storms kind of continue to roll through this area. There has been some local flooding throughout parts of the southeast from some of these massive storms that have rolled through. And I'll show you some of the newest ones in a few moments. But overall, when we look at the drought monitor, we do see a few areas that showed up on the latest drought monitor. These areas in yellow here that are in the abnormally dry category. I want to tell you something. Go back and look at this again. Look where all of the rain this weekend fell. And remember, all of this fell after this drought monitor was released, which means this big area in the midwestern part of the United States. This is corn and soybean country, right? This is where we just got major rainfall. Now, I live over here in Champaign, Illinois, and we have been in significant deficit of rainfall through the entire growing season. And we may have just tallied up about 3 inches in the last 2 days. And 3 inches, the corn can drink every ounce of that. So this will be important to see how this affects this particular region. Drought is expanding in several places, and one of the areas I'm most concerned about is Texas. There's a lot of cotton that's grown here. I realize most of it's there, but there's a lot of cotton grown in this part of Texas as well. It's been very hot. I mean, excruciatingly hot and very dry. So there's also been some drought expansion in parts of the western Corn Belt. It's been quite dry in parts of Iowa, getting into parts of Minnesota and North Dakota. You can also see some drought expansion in the Pacific Northwest over the last month. But I want to let you know, this was a map that was valid on the 5th. So there's always a 1-day lag. So when I record this on Sunday night, I only have data through Saturday. But what I want you to see here is that we had a line of storms come through. That hit this area. That same storms came through here, hit that area. Did a lot of severe damage into this area. In fact, some really strong storms came into Atlanta. But a storm system rolled through here, delivering a bunch of rain. It came through parts of Iowa, delivering a bunch of rain, and even this part of the Corn Belt up here. Where is it not rain down here? Parts of Oklahoma, Texas continue to stay dry. The lower Mississippi River Valley stays dry. The Mississippi River is still very low, although some of the recent rain here will likely get into that river system over the coming days and weeks. So let me show you what I've been talking about. Where is this rain we're mentioning here? A pair of low pressure systems rolled through the Midwest this weekend. One of them was called a mesoscale convective system. It actually blew up into a larger low here. This is the big one that's following it on the backside. But I was watching the storms rolling through your area, and this is just amazing. Look at the shadow just before the sunset. That tells me just how tall these storms were, many of them producing a lot of straight line wind damage and some hail that came all the way from Virginia clear down to the panhandle here. And I captured it on radar just so you could see it here. This is the evolution of those storms late into the day on Sunday. See them right here? Some of them moving quite quickly, bowing out. That would represent strong straight line wind damage. But some of these delivered much needed rains to these particular areas. I mean, very much needed rain to kind of cap off what had been in pockets a drier last 30 to 40 days. Now, in other places, this just added. It added a lot of rain to some very wet locations. And so we just have to keep assessing this to know if drought is going to be something we're going to be concerned about continuing to develop, or if we're starting to kind of remove the risk, especially as we get later on in the season. The pattern is quite favorable for this, okay? I'm talking about better rains going forward. Because what we see over the next week, just watch the evolution of the trough ridge pattern. Whenever you see this much blue on this map, that means where there's lower pressure, lower heights, and the jet stream just has to go south of that. And if it does, that just delivers better chances of lift in the atmosphere, which results in precipitation. And the more heat you see pouring into the western United States, like we're expecting next week, we got this high over low block setting up here. The flow comes around like that, and there's the good old Bermuda high trying to give some influence to pour in some moisture in through here. So this just means that our chances of going dry are low. We have better chances of seeing more sustained flow in the atmosphere that could deliver better precipitation going forward. That's what this pattern is suggesting. So over the next 7 days, we're looking at this. You need to watch a corridor right in through here through which the path of these storm systems are going to go. Multiple lows are going to try to curl up and roll through New England, and they just dive their fronts right through our area. Now, this does not mean we're looking at a wet pattern everywhere. There will be places that get missed in this pattern. But if we just get right into the biggest risk for early this week, it's got to be this map here. So this comes from the Storm Prediction Center. They have identified a very large area starting up in the mid-Atlantic, coming right through parts of Virginia, North South Carolina, northern Georgia, where they have in the day on Monday already an enhanced risk. So I'll be watching this very carefully over the next 12 to 24 hours to see how this evolves, because the storms that are coming through here could pack quite a punch. Now, I'm going to show you some high-resolution model runs, but I want you to remember that the timing and intensity and placement is never going to be perfect with these models. It's just showing us what we need to watch. And it's the combination of these two lows that are coming through the Midwest and Eastern Great Lakes that by Monday afternoon and evening, look at the storms coming over the Appalachian Mountains. Look what we've got down here coming out of Alabama to Georgia. Some of these storms could really pack a punch. And remember, this will be round 2 after what we just got here on Sunday. So I want you to be aware that there is a straight line wind risk, there's a tornado risk, and there is also the risk of damaging hail with these storms. So they roll out, and then we're just going to keep an eye later in the week. Look at this is going into Tuesday now for more isolated storm events that come out of the Midwest, that come out of the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, that come out of parts of the Mid-South and get us over here. So to show you that, let's step it on up to the European model. Okay, we haven't looked at this in a while because normally the summer pattern's dominated by just pop-up storms, not big lows. But if you watch, you're going to see multiple lows curl through here, and what it does is it just targets this area with better flow and storms. So this is going through the day on Monday. We've already assessed that risk. This is Tuesday. See the next low here? Watch the rain come out of this area Tuesday into Wednesday. There, those storms come again by Wednesday into Thursday. And then we have another push. See the next low here by this weekend? It rolls through and drops the chance for storms again. Now you look at that and go, Eric, it doesn't look cohesive. Like this isn't winter. So these are the setup here is not driven by these powerful fronts. So we're just going to watch the daily convective events pop off those fronts. So it's better to look at this statistically by assessing the chances. Now, I'm excited to see the next run come out because I think it's going to show us something a little different. This is the chance over the next 10 days of an inch of rainfall. And what is interesting is how we have this pocket in through here where these probabilities are lower. I don't think that's right. I think there will be storms that roll through this area delivering locally heavy rains. Now, some places could get missed, and you really see this strong boundary that kind of lines up with the Appalachian Mountains. But the point is to tell you here, the pattern is open to delivering storms into this area. My main point here is that we're beating back any sort of late summer drought risk. That's it. That's kind of the mainstay of what this narrative is giving you. Because you look out there into week 2, this is the CPC, this is the European model, and this is the GFS. We are going to ignore the GFS right now, okay? We're going to look at the chances of being above average from both models going into week 2. Now, this doesn't mean flood. This doesn't mean that we're going to be super wet. It just says the atmosphere is conducive in the flow to giving us rounds of storms. What we don't have are big blocking domes of heat and ridges. That's it. That's the main idea here. So get your typical summer thunderstorm activity going. That's the main takeaway. What are the temperatures going to do? Well, let's start off on Monday. Monday's a bit of a hot one here, mid to low 90s, very hot into Texas, but you can see the front. Okay, this is coming from Monday. That's the one that cuts over us. By Tuesday, it's already knocked the temperatures back. So remember, as that front comes through, that's where we're going to really increase the risk on Monday afternoon and evening for the severe storms. Then by Wednesday, near normal. A lot of normal temperatures here. It's extremely hot in Texas, cool in the Midwest. There's Thursday's high temperatures getting into Friday. It's the same recipe for the rest of the week. Near normal for us, extremely hot in the south, and by the end of the week, the heat starts to build into the west. And if you watch this 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies, let's take you out there day 5 through 10. We're above average a bit. Texas is hot. The west starts to heat up. So as we go forward, this is what the temperatures are looking like. And that gets us all the way out there to the start of the 3rd week of August. So this overall pattern, if we just keep kind of having some sense of ridging in the west, means the flow comes across the country like this, which is why we see week 2 still looking a bit warmer than normal, but stormy as well. Now, all of that is the setup for the next couple weeks. What are we doing beyond this? We got some new data I want to share with you. First, CPC's outlook for temperatures. Oops, sorry about that. Temperatures and precipitation for day 8 through 14. We've covered this. There's our warmer risk. There's our stormy risk. Take a look at their new week 3, week 4. They've now got AgSouth's territory here wetter than average. We still have the warmer bias, but wetter than average. This same forecast, see this trajectory kind of into this area being wetter? That is being echoed by the European model. Now, I know you're going, wait a minute, I see brown in there. I know you are, but I want to tell you something. I'm looking at the pattern, not necessarily the splotchiness of the shading. I think this is going to remain an active corridor going through the rest of August, even into the beginning of September. Now, we always know what the wild card is here, and no model is going to predict it. And that's, of course, the hurricane season. But I've got some interesting news on this hurricane season. I have for weeks been worried about this, how warm these waters were, right? We've just nonstop talked about it. I keep even using that frame. I think it's spring-loaded. I think that anything that gets in here could pop and really, really go. But there is one thing that has got me a bit, I don't know, I'm not confused, but something I just got to watch, okay? This is something called the Southern Oscillation Index. Now, this is a measure of the trade winds on the other side of the planet, from Tahiti in the middle of the equatorial Pacific to Darwin in Australia. Now, why should you care about it? Well, have you noticed that on this graphic, since late July, the value has dropped off way down here. It's now down to about -9. It needs to be below -7. And when I say it needs to be, that would be the threshold to tell me that the trade winds in the Pacific are behaving finally as if there is an El Nino fully going. It seems as though we're now getting to this late summer time period and El Nino is finally starting to show up in the pattern. Now, keep this narrative going with me here, because what I want to show you next is the newest forecast. This just came out on Saturday from the European model, looking at the middle of the equatorial Pacific, suggesting that as we look at the ensemble average ocean temperatures from now through December, we could get this up here above 2 degrees C. It's right now about 1 degree Celsius, so we're looking at another degree of warming in that area. Now, why do we care about this? Historically, if an El Nino builds in fall, wind shear in the Atlantic builds. And I've shown you in several of the last videos how low wind shear has been. We got warm ocean temperatures, low wind shear. If you have warm ocean temperatures but high wind shear, systems get torn apart and our hurricane season starts to lose its ability to really make frequent and large systems. So the curiosity in seeing this is over if the wind shear will increase, because this is what the newest long-range update from the European model just suggested. Now, this is looking at tropical storm frequency from September all the way through February. It's looking at a long season here. But what it just did is this. See this number 8.5? That would be the forecast for tropical storm. What I want you to do is I want you to see the change. This was the August forecast. This was July. It was 16.6. So now it's dropped in August almost in half. And the concern here isn't that we won't have hurricanes. It's just, why did the models do that? And the thinking is that with the increased risk of El Nino starting to dominate the pattern, we could see an increase in wind shear. Now, you all know what I'm about to tell you next. It only takes one. What we're doing is just looking at the broad scale ingredients. I will not get over these warm temperatures, though, until it's the end of the season, because anytime I see this, it just has me worried about what the season could possibly do. But speaking of season, let's now go out even farther. If we look at, we've looked halfway through September, let's go beyond that. Let's go to October, November, December. Now, if you look at this and see the drier risks in the west, especially the Pacific Northwest, and the wetter risk you see here into New England, and I were to tell you to maybe, hey, draw a figure of what fall precipitation patterns look like when El Nino dominates, this is the figure you draw. What it is the flow comes around, splits like this, dives to the south, and the subtropical jet just lives here. And if it does that, it's a super wet fall. And that is the current thinking from the latest update from the European model. It is echoed by what the Climate Prediction Center did last month. Now, they're going to show us a new update in probably 10 or 11 days, but they've already got most of AgSouth territory for October, November, December, wetter than average. Now, this makes historical sense as well, because this is the correlation October, November, December with El Nino. And essentially, where you see the reds, the correlation is positive. So if you have an El Nino, you tend to be wetter inside of the areas I just outlined in black. But if we just think about where this could go from this point forward, I want to show you two things. Let's get back here, sorry. If we just keep this going out, this is November, December, January, and then December, January, February. the models are projecting very strong subtropical jet stream flow here. And they're expecting splits across the west, especially the Pacific Northwest. Now, whenever we see this pattern, this typically lends to a lot of activity rolling up the East Coast. We hadn't seen that last year. Remember last winter? Just nothing. No major nor'easters last winter. But this is maybe looking a bit different. Now, this is just for the fun of it. We're looking way out here. We know that this is subjective and it is speculative, and we're just basing it off of one thing primarily, which is El Nino. But to see in February, that's the forecast, troughs over Scandinavia, a trough over the Aleutian Islands. This means the jet's going to run through like this. The subtropical pickup and all of that would represent a very active winter. I just want to put that out there because we've got, what month is it? We've got 4 months to look through this, 4 to 6 months to watch this together. I just think it's kind of fun to look out there that far and see what some of the big climate drivers are. All right, I'm going to get back to it. I hope you all have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk again next Monday. Thanks.